welcome to another episode of Conversations with Cupid. I'm your host, Marla Martenson, and I've been waiting for this interview for months. You guys, I have Paul Selig with me. Hey, Paul.
Hello.
All right, so you guys know how much I love the magical stuff, the woo-woo stuff. Paul is considered to be one of the foremost spiritual channels working today. So he channels some guides that bring through amazing information. He was born in New York City, and you're in Chelsea, right? My favorite neighborhood. Love it. And he received his master's degree from Yale. So you are an academic, you're a professor, and you also offer these workshops and channel these amazing books. So not a woo-woo guy, though, right?
No, not a woo. I just stopped being a professor last month, but I was an academic for 25 years.
Okay.
So no, I don't come from a very woo-woo background.
Right, and that is something so interesting, because when I see who is selected to be these channels, because it seems like it just happens to people, right? And it seems like it's not the woo-woo people.
You know, I don't know that this is something one chooses. I don't know that I even necessarily really believed in channeling all that much before it began to happen with me. So yeah, I'm still scratching my head about how this all came to be.
Well, you know, I look at you guys. I just have to show everybody how many books. There's 4 books now that are coming through you. There's so many, and I made notes because so when you channel these, you'll sit there and you will just start talking, and then you have a woman, Victoria, on the other line, right?
Yep.
So they'll talk, and I just have to so that at one point, and they're so funny because they said, now Paul right now is a man in his 40s who's sitting in a chair with a dog beside him in a body that could use a lot of work. And we're still able somehow to transmit through him a book in regards to the creation of the Christ itself manifesting in man. He is not that special in this regard. He can be this man and transcribe something very differently, but the book that is coming through him right now is about the manifestation of perfection of the Christ itself becoming himself in man. He has an ability to hear. So, and then they go on to say that they had to, you were desirous of finding out something, and so they said, we actually had to come up with ways to break through his resistance, to understand the physical realm was only an aspect of reality. He was giving an experience very early that woke him up, and as a result, he began to see lights floating around people in their energy field. So just tell that little story about how in the 80s you went up on the roof.
Well, you know, I was raised something of an atheist, and when I was about 25 years old, it was shortly after I graduated from grad school, I hit a real wall, and I began to look for a spiritual life, I think, more out of necessity than because it would be interesting. It really wasn't an interest of mine, and I actually didn't come from a place where I knew that a spiritual life was something that one could have or ask for. It just wasn't on the menu at all, so it didn't mean anything to me. But I began to look at a necessity, and a few months later I heard that there was this thing happening called the harmonic convergence, and people were going to be waking up, and I, at that moment, believed that maybe there was a God or something you could call God, and if in fact there was, why wouldn't God want me to be awakened? It was a real simple belief that was possible. And I went up to the roof of the house that I lived in at that time, and I asked to be woken up, and I had a crystal and a mantra. I thought you needed the props to do those waking up stuff. But I had an experience of energy, and I still don't know what it was, and I often say maybe I was hyperventilating, I really don't know, but it was an experience of energy moving through
like
my body out the top of my head.
Thing, maybe. Huh? Kundalini.
That's what people said. It sounded like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, and I started seeing the lights around people after that. And I'd heard a voice telling me to get my act together a few months before that, after I'd started praying for the first time in my life. So the fact that these things were sort of happening in sequence weren't lost to me. And also, I think, given the fact that I came from a background that was agnostic at best, I wanted some proof. I needed some manifestation. I think that's what the guides are talking about in that passage that you read, that I've actually entirely forgotten that was even in the book. But yeah, I was given the ability to feel energy and to see and to hear. in increments. These things develop slowly. But once they were there, they were there. Now they're a part of my existence, which seems to allow the level of transmission that wishes to come through me, and those are the books.
Yeah, and they talk also in the book. There's exercises which I love, and they have us do affirmations saying, "I am the Word. I am Word through my body. I am Word through, so I am Word." And then they said at one point, "Okay, we're going to work on your third eye, and we're going to
Uh-huh.
open your third eye." So this book is an energetic
Yeah.
vibrational transmission, so it works on the reader.
Hmm.
And so, don't you need your third eye? That's how we see lights or see ghosts or see things, is the third eye, right?
It's my understanding,
So
yes.
I've been trying to open mine. So
Mhm.
maybe they can help me with this, Paul. But it's
Maybe they
interesting.
can.
Well, you talk about, I mean, they said, hey, he's got a body that could use some work. I've
Yeah,
heard you say you used to smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day. You,
I
you
did.
weighed 100 pounds more. So was that the case at this point?
At that point, I was smoking. No, I quit smoking for the first book. I was still very heavy, and my weight still goes up and down as it wishes to. But when the first book was channeled, which was I think 2009, it was unexpected. I didn't plan to channel a book, but I had quit smoking about a year before, and I had been very sensitive energetically when I was younger, when I was in my 30s, early 30s. And then I was still working, I was still doing a group, but I was pretty toxic, truthfully. I mean, I smoked a lot. When I quit smoking in 2008, 2007, 2008, my whole system opened up, and my abilities really had a boost, and my hearing changed. And I was doing a weekly group in my apartment. I did it for many years for a small group of people, and it was on the hush because I was teaching at NYU, and I really didn't want people to know what I did, that I had this other esoteric life. But I started to begin to lecture in Chatham, and I wasn't really aware that I was even lecturing. And people were saying, you know, Paul, that was really beautiful. You should record this, or I wish I'd written that down. I was never that interested in the information that came through me. I was far more interested in the energy that was coming through when I worked, and the energy that comes through when I'm doing groups or live streams, or it's very, very palpable for people, palpable for me as well. And I always needed that. It helped me to trust the information that was coming through because it was accompanied by something that you could actually feel. So when I was doing the groups, I wasn't caring initially about the information at all. So the opening of the third eye is, which they work with us on periodically. I don't know that you can try to do that. I know that you can claim that you have the right to it and be willing to release what stands in the way of
Well,
your true vision.
and they talk about the fluoride in the water and all the calcification of it in our diet. So I'm I'm a vegan. I do my juicing. I take all the supplements they say. I'm an
Yeah.
energy healer, Reiki. So I do all that. So I've been on my journey for a while. I'm even writing a book about it. I write memoirs. So I'm on my fifth book, and I have a whole section. So then I see you, Paul, and you didn't have to do anything.
Do any of it. And I still eat meat, although I wish I didn't.
Yeah.
And I would love to be juicing, and I don't have the patience. And I work out now because I'm forced to, not
Yeah.
because it's something that I enjoy.
Right.
So I don't come from that. What I did come from, though, I think was a place of real desire. And when
Yes.
I began to open up spiritually, it meant to me that the world was not what I thought it was. Suddenly, it was like moving from one landscape into a whole other one where things were operating differently. And as I did that, I began to open up. Now, I studied a form of energy healing when I was in my early 30s. I went to healers first to have that experience of it, really to get a context from my own experience as an empath, which was just starting to happen. I didn't know what it was. But if I was sitting next to you on the train and my left shoulder went out, I could look over and see you, and you'd have your left shoulder in a sling. And so I was feeling what was going on all around me, and I was, not understanding it. So when I studied energy healing, I suddenly had a reason to be accessing my abilities. And I really do think that my abilities developed in response to supporting other people. I don't feel that what I do is very special. I think it's entirely unsexy. if you want to go there with it. I mean, I take dictation. I am a spiritual stenographer when I'm channeling. I'm there whispering and repeating the words, entire books as they come, sitting in a chair with my eyes closed. And this poor woman, Victoria Nelson in California, who's been enormously patient and has sat through now 4 entire books that have been dictated. The psychic work that I do, which is my practice with clients, I do this in my workshops and live streams as well, is different. And I'm then accessing the other abilities to support other people. See, when I'm channeling, the guides are sort of working through me. Right. So I become the vehicle for them. But when I'm reading, so for example, if you wanted to know, say, what was going on with your sister, I can, usually with her name, step into her and often begin to resemble her. And then I can hear. So it's like I become the radio for them.
So if I say, hey, Paul, my sister and I have had an argument. I'd really like to know why she hates me so much, or whatever. Then you step in and you can say, listen, it's because you're such a bitch. Or
pretty much. And I can tune into you, and I can see also what's going on with you, and I can also hear what you really need from one another that you may not be getting. Yeah. Because actually in discourse or conversation at different levels of agreement. But that's different. And, I didn't realize that I could do that work again until I was doing it.
Yeah, because it's all these things that kept happening, and then to realize that you're psychic and you can give people readings, that's very interesting. Did you just start doing it with friends or something and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing for you?
I used to have people come to do energy work, and then they started to come to talk to my guides. They just wanted to talk to my guides, and really what happened, I didn't know that I could read, but I was in a relationship, and my ex kept saying, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. And so suddenly I was giving on-demand readings pretty much on a very consistent basis, and I was very accurate. So I learned that I could do it. I didn't know that I could do the empathic work and really sort of the somatizing, or it's a form of physical mediumship, really, until I was sitting with somebody and she asked about her father and she gave me his name and my eyes were closed and I tuned into the father and she gasped. And I said, what's the matter? She said, my God, you look just like him. And it wasn't a good relationship. She hadn't seen him in many years. And so she was very startled. And I realized that I could do it every time. And it's just like I step into the other person.
That's amazing.
Well, I don't know. It's amazing in a way. I like it because it's provable. I've been filmed. There's a show called The Unexplained that was on a few years ago that featured me sort of stepping into other people. And what that looks like. I like it for that reason, but I also, I had been a playwright. That was my training at Yale, and that was all about being other characters. So the idea of stepping into somebody else or letting yourself be taken over really was something that I just did unconsciously as I was writing. There was no way for me to know that it was something that I could actually do that was real until it was verified by other people. And so, it's a balancing of the skills. But I will say, when I do my classes and things, the guides often teach people how to develop empathically, and it's not hard.
Well, let me say, something's interesting because I am a Reiki crystal healer, and I'm on a healing team at a center here. And the other night, I was in the healing room when we were healing, 2 of us. We worked as a team. Somebody comes in, gets a 30-minute, and I'm talking to the other healer. All of a sudden, my throat just closed up. It hurt. It was painful. It was so painful. No reason. And then the woman that came in had a throat chakra issue.
That's exactly.
And then the next woman that came and laid on the table, I felt I've never had heartburn in my life. I felt like heartburn or something. I said to her, "Do you have heartburn?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I've been having heartburn." Now this was interesting, but who wants to be having all these pains from? Right?
Well,
I was like, I don't want to feel this, but
I'm willing to. I'm willing to, and truthfully, feeling emotional pain is just as challenging,
right,
as physical pain. But I don't stay there. When this first started happening to me, it was just like you describe it. But I would, run to the bathroom and the client would show up 5 minutes later with colitis. I mean, it was like, it was bizarre.
And you said you've had a hot flash, things.
I did. I had a hot flash, and I didn't know what it was. I was online or on the phone with the client, and I started to burn from the inside out. I said, I don't know what's going on here. She said, I do. It's me.
Yeah, you might be getting one from me, Paul, on this video.
It's okay, but now I know what it is, and now that I know what it feels like, it becomes part of the vocabulary that I work with in my practice.
Okay.
So, it becomes something else. But what I don't do is take on the pain. That's not my responsibility. I can touch into it to know where it is or to
Okay.
feel where the block is, but I shouldn't be hurt through the process of doing this. But initially, I mean, sometimes I'll be in session, I'll jump, I'll feel something, and I'll be startled by it. But mostly, I'm startled by it because I can't see it and it's happening.
Right.
It's not
Right.
expected. And you get used to it. But you're doing empathic work. That's exactly how it
That's
starts.
the first, yeah, that's the first time it happened to me, and I was so shocked. And because it happened with two in a row, I thought that must be what it is. I
Well,
still don't hear, people. I feel like, oh, I'm behind in my expansion because other people say, oh, I hear things, I hear messages when I put my hands on people, and I said, I don't, but
don't
then
gotta be watchful of this because you may. And first of all, it's not a
I
contest.
know
It's
exactly.
just not. It has nothing to do with that. People are worked with in very, very different ways. Even though I was seeing lights around people for years, I didn't have a well-developed sort of third eye screen. I didn't access visual information until about 9 years ago, and then bang,
Hmm.
it came.
Yeah.
But it came, I think, because I claimed it. Now, some of this stuff you have to sort of claim that you have a right to, that it's
Right.
part of who you are, and be willing to be taught by it. But you can't tell it what it's supposed to be. You
Right.
understand that because you'll get it wrong. That's still the lower self trying to sort of fix everything or
Hmm.
attain something. And this level of work is a lot about receptivity, at least for me. I don't know how other people work. So hearing, I work with language. I'm a clairaudient, so I'll hear specific language. But I have friends that I think are marvelously gifted that don't hear anything and they access everything visually.
Hmm.
I feel in my body. Other people see it in the energy field. They don't have to feel it. I seem to be fortunate in that I hear the same sort of guides consistently. I really don't see them. Other people see them. I have medium friends that can describe them, and I've seen on a couple of occasions I've seen,
Uh-huh.
but I trust the language that comes through me. But
Right.
I'm conscious as well that I don't want to necessarily tune in to my grandma, who was a nice lady but very, very unhappy. And I don't know that she's got the wisdom necessarily that I want to be bringing through for somebody else. So I
Right.
think discernment is important. And that's one of the reasons I sort of am not a huge advocate of people messing with Ouija boards because, they're it's exciting, and
It's
there's a
exciting.
charge to it.
Yeah.
But you want to really be clear that whatever you're opening to is of the light or,
Now,
you
with
know,
mine, I do ask for the light. I ask for Archangel Michael to be here, and really only my angel comes through, which has
good.
been beautiful. And it's
Good.
interesting because now for your guides, I know people always want to know, would you know their names? And then, now in the book, Victoria asked a question in the book, the first book, I Am the Word, and she says, "Were you once human?" And they said, no, we were not. Some of us were in form and personality was activated, but ultimately we are teachers and we are not coming from this plane of existence. We have manifested right now as frequency and consciousness, and we do not exist in form. We existed in form in some ways at different times, and we have inhabited form, but we are not dead people come back through a tape device speaking to Paul.
Yeah.
Do you understand this? And then when they say, do you understand this? You're kind of like, well, no, because what kind of form were you in? I mean, the human mind wants to know all of this stuff. But it's fascinating. They're just their consciousness that have come to teach us through you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how they're working now. I doubt that I'm the first. They say that they're teachers. In the new book, they do some more work on self-identification. I'm the one. I've been There's been resistance on my part, I think, over the years to names. I think the naming can get a little caught up in ego. And, when I was first coming into this kind of work in New York City in the 90s, there was a Michael group meeting on the Upper West Side, and there was a Gabriel group in Brooklyn, and the Reiki people weren't talking to the Barbara Brennan people, and everybody wanted to go to Brooklyn to hear Gabriel because the Michael, and it was a lot of ego, you know what I mean? And finally, I think it's got to be the truth of the message, whatever you want to call it. Truth
Right.
is truth. You can package it however you want. My guides have been saying, in all of the books, that they're working in different ways, or the message is coming forth in different ways through different channels in ways that are appropriate to different cultures.
Hmm.
So, on that level, this is something that's happening, I think, to awaken everybody, not to sort of say, I'm so and so, and here I am, and I'm the great I am speaking. But my challenge with it, I think, has always been that I'm the channel. You know, it's like, who the hell am I? And what is this? Again, I'm somebody that didn't necessarily even believe in this. I do know that when I'm doing this work, something is happening that's well beyond me. And it's like I crawl into the back seat of the car and let somebody else drive. And I'm still sort of sometimes hanging over the seat to try to make sure there's no tree being hit. But sometimes I'm really just sort of like watching the view out the window, and I'm letting this teaching come through. And I trust at this point that the quality of the teaching, which is never fear-based and is very loving, but also kind of tough, is acceptable. When something doesn't ring true to me, I question it. And that's in all of the books. When something doesn't ring true, when I don't understand it, just like you said, well, what does it mean you're not informed? I don't know what that means to me. I think what it means to me is that, I'll put it this way, in the new book, somebody asked a question that we included in the book, because there were these live streams, and some of the Q&As we kept because the guy had said, and this is part of the text, so it's in the text. And somebody said, you know, they were asking about personality, and does the personality survive? And the guide said, well, we think we have a very good personality. However, in some ways, it's really been created in order to be in consort with you. It's what we need to be able to teach you through. And they said, I think the example they said, is we can have it if we want it. Like we can wear socks if we want to, but we don't need to, which seemed to imply they don't have feet unless they want it. Right. So that at that level of consciousness, how we're perceiving form, I think may be very, very different. We're completely limited by our sense of what we know to be real and in three-dimensional reality. When I'm tuning into other people, I used to think, like if I was tuning into your sister in Miami, that I was flying to Miami and landing in your sister. And it was actually a physicist that said, no, Paul, you're not going there, you're going in. There are other ways of accessing. Right. So I think we always want to interpret these abilities through the lens of what we know in 3D, and maybe this is just the best that we can do to understand it.
And that's why we can do the energy healing long distance, like the Reiki. You don't need to be there.
Absolutely.
Because
you don't need to be there.
Right. I've got to just read this about the energy. And they say the energies that are present on the planet now, believe it or not, are changing everyone. And consequently, the level of growth that will be present on this plane in the coming years will be nothing like anybody has ever seen. The growth that is present already in your own abilities to acclimate the energy may be surprising to you, and they will continue to as you continue to work with them. Mm-hmm. So, because we talk about, I keep hearing about the new earth, the vibration of the earth is changing, and everything's vibration. And I notice myself changing so much. I feel my hands are always buzzing. I feel vibration through myself. I can't really drink alcohol anymore. I have to be very careful about what I eat. It just doesn't work with me anymore. It's like my vibration's raised, so any toxins just make me feel terrible. So I've changed a lot. Yeah, and I think
it's happening. That's the message. I mean, they're very consistent. I think you've been reading from the first book, I think, and I haven't looked at the first book in years. And I really don't read the books, and I'm really not a student of the books, and I would benefit greatly, I think, if I did more work with them. It's easier for me. I don't read other people's books either about this stuff because I'm trying to keep my channeling pure. Right. You're hearing New York City in the background.
Yeah.
But visiting the old texts, I don't know, it's very interesting because they've been really consistent in their teaching throughout the years. And they'll actually introduce a teaching that they will sort of expound upon 3 or 4 years later, in a text, and they'll plant the idea and then they'll elaborate on it. So that's how it's always been.
And then you said you don't really watch other channelers. I know, like, for instance, Daryl Anka, who does Bashar, or there's Abraham Hicks. They say that they get blocks of thought, and then they which is really weird. I mean, I just thinking about how you could do this, but blocks of thought, and then they put it out in their language. But do you actually hear every word and repeat it? Is that what you're doing? So you don't hear blocks, you hear every word.
No, I can get a concept. I can be given visual information like that and then go into an engagement with it. When I'm reading psychically, I move into knowing, and you'll get a block of knowing. You'll just like know what's going on and be able to sort of then piece it apart. But when I'm channeling, I'm working. The books are not written by me, and that's important to understand. The books are the transcripts of these sessions, so the languaging I think is very specific. I've seen other these folks channel on YouTube briefly, and I'm interested, but I tend not to watch other people do the work. It's hard enough for me to watch myself do the work. I'm appalled when I see myself, but I do it anyway, and I've had to lose some of that self-consciousness. I did see an old clip of Jane Roberts channeling Seth, which was fascinating to me only because I recognized how her body seemed to be worked with, which reminded me of what I go through. For me, at least at this level of my development, this is still a very, very physical process for me. It's not always easy and graceful. If you've seen me channel, you have. I whisper the words and repeat them, and oftentimes a mile a minute to keep up with it.
Right.
And there may be, as I continue to do this work, other ways that the information wants to come through. I was a classroom teacher for 25 years, and the idea of being able to sort of download a block of knowing or information and then speak it, that's a form. I don't call it channeling, but it is inspired. And for me, when I use the term channeling, I'm pretty specific on the energy. That I'm literally taking the words. When I'm reading psychically, I'm doing much more what you describe, which is, okay, this is what's going on in the marriage, boom, 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 boom. I get it all at once, and then I have to pick it apart. But I'm speaking as Paul then.
Right.
When I'm speaking as the guides, I'm letting them talk, which is word for word.
And what's interesting when I watch, for example, Daryl or Esther Hicks, they'll close their eyes first and breathe and take a few minutes, and then boom, they like Bashar will come in and hey, yeah. But it seems like they're always there with you, because like right now, you could just say, "Oh, guides, what was that?" And then they'll say, "Yeah." Like they're always there, right? For you, you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't used to be that way. When I was first starting to do energy groups, and this was me in my mid 30s, I suppose, I was always terrified that nothing would happen, and I felt in those days like I had a tin can fallen up to my head, and I was just hoping that somebody would grab the other can and talk into it. And I was a wreck, because all these people were coming to hear this, and I was like, I don't know what's, this poor woman used to drive me to these groups, and I'd be melting down every time. Yeah. And, there was a certain point in that period where I heard a request for permission to merge. And I just said, okay. And I felt this energy sort of come through for about 20 minutes. And the only thing that I can say is, since that time, I don't feel that I'm going elsewhere to access. I feel that it's present. But I will say that it feels present in different degrees depending on how I'm working. So if I'm going about my day, I'm not channeling. I may say, gosh, would this be a good time to eat? And I might hear not wise. And that's only because I posed the question. If I pose a question to myself, they may come through. But, my daily life, even though I accept the phenomena because I've gotten so used to it, is no different than anybody else's. These are just other ways of accessing information. That's real. But yeah, I will say it's always pretty present. And, I sit down in the chair sometime, close my eyes. I do a prayer of protection to start, which actually is how I sort of step into the back seat. I just recede as that's going on. And then what happens is I'll hear one phrase of language repeated insistently. And they'll keep saying the same phrase until I say it, and then all of the rest of the words come right after it. So, it might be, they need to know, and I finally say, they need to know, and then kaboom. Okay. Right. There's a whole lecture, a whole chapter, a whole book. That's just how it comes through me.
Yeah. And so what about, for example, you're going to be doing a workshop next month, and when you're going to decide to do a workshop, okay, the guides are going to teach this and we're going to do that, it's a channel workshop, do they tell you first, hey, Paul, we want to do a workshop and we want it to be on this? Or do you say, hey, guides, I'm thinking of doing a workshop, what do you think? Is it like a co-creation?
No, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, I know what's happening in the workshops now because it's been happening since July. Well, actually, that's not true. August, this last August, because they finished the last book, the Book of Mastery, which is coming out very shortly. There you go. They finished the dictation of that. I mean, in the winter, and then it was turned in June. And the moment that was turned in, they began delivering other teachings in preparation for what's next. So it's not like, should we do a workshop here? I agree to do a workshop someplace in the understanding that they're going to be there and show up. But the deal that I make is that what they teach is their business. Mm-hmm. So I've never stepped into a workshop knowing how it was going to play out. My guides work with energy, and they attune people to the energy that they work with. So the workshops really aren't about just listening to the guides teach, although they do a lot of that. They're also getting people working with the energy and developing their own abilities to send and receive and feel and whatever it's going to be. So there's a few attunements that they always do to get people acclimated to the energy they work with. Everything else, all bets are off. It depends on where they want to go. Yeah. So they've been doing brand new work in the workshops recently, and it's been fascinating and really high level. But I can't say I know what they're going to do before they do it.
Well, I'm so excited to feel that energy because I'm going to come to the workshop, so I'm so excited to feel that next month. So this is interesting. It's interesting as a professor. So in your classrooms, you always had to plan out your teachings and your programs, and that's a lot of work. And now you're still involved in teaching, but you don't have to do any of the planning. So that's kind of...
I'll tell you, yeah, it's like that. But I just, I don't know whether it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago, there was a certain point in my teaching career where I decided to stop working with notes. Mm-hmm. And I would just show up and talk. And I realize now that I was just getting used to or getting trained to show up and allow myself to be inspired, and not rely on a crutch.
Right.
Now, granted, I've been teaching the same courses for many, many years, so I knew my subject. But the joy seemed to be to see how it would be told through me. And that's not a lot different than how the channeling happens. The funny thing is, though, I'm just not trained in the subjects that I teach. I mean, I'm not a guru. I don't want to be. I have no interest. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I don't consider that's not a name that I want to claim for myself. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to show up and be participatory to the work that comes through me and the experience of it and the phenomena of it, because there's phenomena which fascinates me. But I'm also sort of privileged, I think, to be party still to people in their transformation, which is what I loved about classroom teaching. That was always the joy, was seeing people grow and change. And I have this on a different level. I just don't get to take the credit in the same way. I really do feel sometimes like the ventriloquist puppet, who's engaged or being engaged for some other reason, other purpose than I might have designed for myself.
And what did your family think about this? You came from a family that was pretty much, you said your family thought people who were into this kind of stuff were crazy or weird or,
Crazy. I mean, it's sort of the convenience of being a New Yorker. I grew up on the Upper West Side. I did spend a very strange year in a sort of a parochial school that was rather progressive, and that was only because it was affordable. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember anything about religion being taught there. It was just one of those places. But I had no exposure. But what we used to do was sort of snicker at people who believed in things. Right. It was like, look at those people in the restaurant, they're praying over their food. Yeah. Snicker, snicker, snicker. It was a real arrogant kind of, superiority based in nothing, except, I didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I was, strangely enough, my father, who died when I was 5, began exploring the paranormal shortly before his death. And I know this because he worked with a man named Lawrence LeSean, who's still living, who was one of the pioneers in looking at sort of the mind-body connection with illness, and, was a big proponent of meditation early on. So the stuff was in the house. The ideas might have been there. So the idea of the paranormal was much less offensive somehow than the idea of an organized religion. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that because I don't come from organized religion, I wasn't party to that. My father was a German Jew. My mother was a Protestant, pretty much, and nobody was practicing in the house. Um, I didn't have a whole lot of baggage. I didn't have a whole lot of prejudice. I allowed this stuff. So when my guides started teaching, and the language that they work with is rather steeped in the Judeo-Christian tradition, although they unpack it to mean what they mean. Jeffrey Kripal, who wrote the introduction to the new book, he's the head of the religious studies department at Rice University, says that this is a Gnostic teaching. This is old stuff. And my guides are doing it in a language that's available to people. So I don't have the baggage to be prejudiced about it, although they had to sort of get me over some of my stuff too. And I think that they still do. It's interesting. But yeah, my family's been okay. My mom, when she finally realized that this was happening, she came to the first book launch, the first book signing, and I told my story in the front row, and she was there, and I had the sense that she was looking at me as if she hadn't really known who I was until this time. And my brother, who was always very competitive with me, said something very funny. He said, I can't compete with a prophet. So we've actually, I think, had a better relationship since, Yeah. And he's doing very well in the world. So I have to say that my family's been supportive. But, I'm fortunate this way. There wasn't a lot to break from, this is what's happened, and this is my story now, and I'm doing my best to show up for my work.
And the guides in the book, I keep referring to the I am the word. They said when I think Victoria had asked, "Who are you?" They said, "We are part of God. We are the essence of God. As you get closer to the Godhead, you vibrate in accordance with God." And then she said, "What is God?" And they said, "God is the great source. God is the frequency and the energy that joyfully permeates all matter. God is everything, and we say this with joy." Yeah. So, and it's really, they do use the word the Christ itself, but I would say it's not a religion. So it's for anyone from any religious background it's just information coming through from.
Yeah, they define the Christ. Their definition of the Christ is the aspect of the Creator that can be manifested in physical form. Mm-hmm. So they're not talking about a specific personage. They're talking about the indwelling God. That's how and they say there's a name for it in every religion, but the God within.
I just wanted to touch on one other thing. Now with all of the terrorist attacks and violence and panic, I know in the books the guides say you can't hold yourself in the light when you hold your brother in darkness. Am I saying it right? And it is hard to hold those people in light when they've shot up over 100 people or beheaded people or all these horrible things that are going on. Do you think the guides would say that it's this shift, that things are just getting all mixed up, or this is
they say where they have said, we're ascending, the species is transforming, they say, and there's a lot of resistance to this change. There's a lot of chaos. They've been saying that for a long time. They say in the first book, and this was written back in 2000 and channeled back in 2009, they say that mankind is at a time of is at a time of, what was it, reckoning. Use. And they define it. They say, a reckoning is a facing of oneself and one's own creations. And they say what's been created in fear has to be recreated in a higher way. And, they say, if you think about it, they've said repeatedly, your belief in your fear-based belief in safety is such that you build a bomb to protect yourself. You've created the means for your own self-destruction in the guise of staying safe. They say it doesn't make any sense. It's lunacy. So, I do these live streams pretty much every week now. And the last several that I've done have unfortunately followed very tragic events in different parts of the country or the world. And the guides are addressing the consciousness around this. They don't talk about world events, but they really do address the consciousness of fear and how to attend to it in ways that I'm not even yet at a place to try to reiterate and do it justice. But the basic teaching that you mentioned, which is you cannot be the light and hold another in darkness, has been a consistent teaching. But they also say you can't reason with darkness, because to reason with darkness brings you to its level. And things don't change from that place. They change by being lifted. And the guides say how things are changed or lifted is by witnessing the innate divinity, even when you don't want to. Especially when you don't want to, when it's a challenge. Now, this doesn't mean you don't take other actions, but the actions that you take then will be made in a higher level of consciousness than if you're being reactive in fear or in judgment or in condemnation. I mean, it's an old teaching. It's older than my guides, but what you damns you right back. There's no other way around it. No other way around it.
And I'm going to go here, since we're all connected energy-wise and we're all one, I think about how the animals, over 150 billion animals are slaughtered every year by the meat, egg, and dairy industries, the factory farming, the animals, not to mention the cockfights and the dogfights and the circuses, the fur industry, all the industries. The animals are suffering unimaginable every day, the pain, the fear. And that's a lot of fear and pain energetically. And so then we see the violence in the society. We see a lot of things going on. And I think it's connected. I don't know what the guides would say.
Well, I mean, they've not talked about it specifically, although recently when they've been doing work on the planet, they've made a point of including all sentient beings. They've been really going there, and I was surprised because that was a change in the language that they work with, and this is in the witnessing of the divine. I had something else to say about this, and I'm just blanking on what it was, so maybe I'm not meant to say it. I know what they say, actually, and it's in the new book. They say all is holy. Everything is holy. And you don't kill what you know to be holy. It doesn't make sense. But you see, we've lost. This is the simple thing. First of all, if I don't know whether the schmuck on the bus sitting next to me, who I wish was sitting someplace else, is divine being, if I can't do that, how the hell am I going to do it for the person that's really causing trouble or the man next door? We've gotten so far away, and I'll include myself here in the awareness of the divine in each human being. I think yes, we extend it to all things, right. But I don't think we've come pretty far away. So is the slaughter of animals contributing to this? Probably yes. Probably yes, as a level of consciousness. I don't know why they're not attending to that directly. Maybe it's just not their teaching yet. But you know what? They've got 2 more books in this next series, and I have no idea where they're going to go to. I have a sense.
Maybe I'm giving them that idea. Hey, guides, can you address it? And well, speaking of going far away from it, even the reality shows, it's all about negativity and putting other people down and arguing and criticizing. So, the media and the shows that we watch and the violence on TV and all that. So, we for entertainment, we've gone really, really...
There's other ways, the Coliseum, it's just become... social media. I mean, it's the same stuff.
It was always a lot of. Well, Paul, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I could talk to you all day, but I know I'm not going to keep you. And I will see you next month at the event. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Bye-bye now. Have a great day.